Bharavi is one of the most renowned poets of Sanskrit literature. His only work available today is the poem Kiratarjuniyam, which has earned itself a place amongst the 5 Mahakavyas of Sanskrit literature. As with most Sanskrit poets, very few concrete details are available about Bharavi's life. Based on references from Avantisundarikatha of Dandi and Aihole inscriptions, it is largely believed that Bharavi's real name was Damodar, who belonged to southern India. He may have been a court poet of King Simhavishnu of Pallava dynasty between 550 to 600 AD. Bharavi, which literally means the radiant sun, may have been a title he earned due to his illustrious compositions. A very famous shloka of Bharavi goes like this: Sahasa vidadheeta kriyamaviveko paramapadampadam Vrunute vimrushakarinam gunalubdha swayameva sampadam. This means that one should not act in haste without thinking. Unthoughtful actions lead to unfavorable situations. The wealth that is attracted to virtues will itself choose to be with a thoughtful master. A folklore says that Bharavi, in order to earn some money, presented this verse to a rich merchant who paid a good price for it. The merchant framed it in his bedroom. One day, when he returned from his tour, he saw a young man sleeping beside his wife. In anger, he was about to murder this young man when suddenly his eyes fell on this framed verse and he stepped back to think. He then woke up his wife and asked for an explanation. The wife told him that this young man is none other than their long-lost son who had returned after many years. The merchant was glad that he did not kill his own son. Now let us discuss the famous composition of Bharavi, that is Kiratarjuniyam. Kiratarjuniyam is a Mahakavya in 18 cantos, based on an event described in Mahabharata. The title of the composition refers to the encounter between two characters. One, Kirat, meaning hunter or a forest dweller. Here, it is Lord Shiva in guise of a Kirat. And the second character is Arjun, one of the 5 Pandav brothers. It describes the event where Arjun went in the Himalayas to do penance to acquire Pashupatastra, and Shiva tested his caliber by engaging in a fight with him. The above incident is narrated briefly in the Vana Parva of Mahabharata. However, Bharavi has transformed it into an elaborate kavya by giving graphic descriptions of nature, detailed discussions of statecraft and politics, and elaborate description of battle. The prominent sentiment of the composition is Veera Rasa, that is, sentiment of courage. Coming back to Kiratarjuniyam, let us discuss the setting of this composition. The Pandavas are suffering their 12-year-long banishment in Dvaita forest. In the first canto, Yudhishthira sends a spy to know how Duryodhan is ruling Hastinapur, and the feedback received says that Duryodhan is fulfilling his duties as a king very efficiently. This angers Draupadi, who advises Yudhishthira to wage war against Duryodhan right away. She strongly feels that Duryodhan will never keep his word of giving back their kingdom without a fight. In the second canto, Bhim supports Draupadi's argument, but Yudhishthir insists on completion of banishment period, which he feels is the right thing to do. In the third canto, Rishi Vedavyas seconds the thoughts of Draupadi and advises Yudhishthira to utilize their time in banishment to prepare for a war by acquiring divyastras or divine weapons. He insists that Arjun should please gods like Indra and Shiva to receive such divyastras. Arjun follows his instructions and proceeds to Himalayas and starts his penance on Indrakil mountain. Here onwards, the plot takes a pause and the poet takes over. From 4th canto onwards to as far as the 10th canto, the poem is purely descriptive. The objects of description include the autumn weather, the Himalayas, the Indrakil mountain, the Gandharvas, the heavenly nymphs popularly known as Apsaras, the water sports, dawn and dusk, attempts of Apsaras to distract Arjun from his penance, and so on. These cantos are full of different figures of speech, an attempt to show many skills of the poet. In the 11th and 12th canto, Indra appears before Arjun and advises him to please Shiva for acquiring the weapons he desires. 14th to 18th cantos deal with the actual encounter between Shiva in the form of a Kirat and Arjun, which gives this composition its title. In the end, of course, Arjun receives Shiva's blessings and acquires Pashupatastra. He then returns to Dvaita forest with his mission accomplished. Kiratarjuniyam gave Bharavi the fame of Artha Gauravam, or profoundness of thought. As the well-known quote goes, Upama Kalidasasya Bharaver Artha Gauravam. Artha Gauravam means to express maximum thought in minimum words. As we say in Hindi, Gagar mein Sagar. Bharavi has brought out various principles and maxims of difficult and so-called boring fields like grammar, polity, philosophy, etc. in simple, innovative and comprehensible manner. Let us look at some examples that in course of time have become famous quotes of worldly wisdom. At the outset, Bharavi describes the spy who is about to give honest feedback of Duryodhan's rule to Yudhishthira as follows. Kruta pranamasya mahim mahibhuje jitam sapatnena nivedayishyatah na vivyathe tasya mano nahi priyam pravaktum icchanti mrushahitaishinaha. He, with folded hands, did not falter while describing the positive state of affair in the kingdom of a rival. This is because well-wishers do not wish to lie just to sound pleasing to the ears of their masters. They speak the truth even if it is hurtful. In the same context, the spy says the following words before giving the actual news. Kriyasu yuktair nrupachara chakshusho न वंचनीयाः प्रभवो अनुजीविभिः अतोर्हसि क्षन्तुमसाधु साधु वा हितं मनोहारी च दुर्लभम वचः. This means that those spies who are appointed by the king should not fool him by giving false information. Hence, whatever truth I speak, whether it sounds good or bad, you as a king should pardon me. Because words that are both good for your well-being as well as pleasant to hear are quite rare. When explaining why Duryodhan is trying to rule with fairness and justice, maintaining law and order, the spy brings out importance of noble people, saying, Tathapi jimha sabhavat jigeshaya tanoti shubhram gunasampadayashaha Samunnayan bhuti manarya sangamat varam virodhopi samam mahatmabhihi. Since Duryodhan is competing against a noble person like you, in spite of him being wicked, he is trying to spread his success by behaving pure and virtuous. This proves that even being enemies with noble souls bears better fruits than being friends with evil people. Looking at the condition of banished Yudhishthira, the spy says these words of wisdom. Vrajanti te moodhadhiya parabhavam bhavanti mayavishu yena mayinaha. Pravishya hignanti shathas tatha vidha na samvrutangan nishita iveshavaha. those fools who do not behave cunningly with cunning people are defeated and left to roam in forests. Just as a sharp arrow enters the one not wearing an armor and kills him, similarly wicked people destroy the naive and the gullible. Indicating the nature of Yudhishthira, the spy says, Avandhyakopasya vihanturapadam bhavanti vashyaha swayameva dehinaha amarsha shunyena janasya jantuna na jata hardena na vidvishadaraha. This means, those who display anger on enemies and benevolence on friends, only they are respected. The one who neither gets angry nor favors friends in need is neither feared nor respected by anyone. This verse reminds me of a well-known Hindi poet, Sri Ramdhari Singh Dinkar, who has written a beautiful poem in the same context called Shakti or Kshama. A few lines of the poem are, Kshama shobhati us bhujang ko jiske paas garal ho, usko kya jo dantaheen visharahit vineet saral ho. Bharavi's Artha Gauravam is at its peak when he sums up entire knowledge of how a king should be in just one verse. He says, Asaktam aradhayato yatha yatham vibhajya bhaktya samapakshapataya gunanuraga diva sakhyamivan nabadhatesya trigana parasparam. This means, Duryodhan is ruling without any bias, nor is he doing anybody undue favors. The three Purusharthas, that is, Dharma, Artha and Kama, are being pursued by him in equal proportions. Hence, there is no conflict, and each Purushartha is flourishing with the fulfillment of another. Thus, we have discussed some of the finest examples of Artha Gauravam till now. Apart from this, Bharavi is also known as Atapatra Bharavi, for a simile he has brought out while describing the Himalayas. Utphulla sthala nalini vanad amushmat uddhutaha sarasija sambhava paragaha vatya bhirviyati vivartitaha samantat adhatte Kanakamaya Atapatram Lakshmeen. Atapatra means umbrella or something that protects you from the sun. The meaning of the verse is, Kailash mountain has in front of it many places filled with lotus flowers, whose pollen grains, when blown by the wind in circular motion, seem like holding a golden umbrella in the sky. Another beautiful simile compares Yudhishthira in banishment to the weak moon of second day of lunar month. The verse says, Kshaya yuktam api swabhavajam dadatam dhama shivam samruddhaye pranamantyanapaaya mutthitam pratipat chandramiva prajanrupam. People respect a proactive and benevolent king even during his weak times, just like they respect the moon of second day of Shukla Paksha of lunar month, which is in its weakest phase and is going to grow stronger day by day. I can't resist but talk about another beautiful simile which is used in the context of actual encounter between Kirat and Arjun. Kirat, that is Shiva, has neutralized all of Arjun's weapons and strategies. Arjun is now left with only one option, that is, to fight with bare hands. The poet describes this with a simile that all of us can immediately relate to. Abhilashata upayam vikramam kirti lakshmayor asugamamari sainyaihi ankam abhyagatasya janaka iva shishutve supriyasyayka sunoho avinayamapi sehe pandavasya smararihi. Arjun, who was adamant of winning, attacked Shiva's chest with bare hands. Shiva, who is the enemy of Smara, that is Cupid, endured this audacity just like a father who loves his only child very dearly and endures all his childhood stubbornness. As discussed earlier, Bharavi has not only used conventional figures of speech in his poem, but has also tried to show off his knowledge. Entire 15th canto of Kiratarjuniyam is full of such verses that seem very artificial just to cater the need of showcasing wit, knowledge and skill of the poet. This style has later inspired poets like Magh and Sri Harsh to compose such complicated verses that has made their compositions very tedious to read for ordinary readers. Nevertheless, these are brilliantly composed verses and deserve our attention. The verses are an example of Chitrakavya, where the beauty of poem is brought out with the way the sounds and syllables are used. Here, we shall not explore the meaning of the verses, but appreciate only their arrangement that creates a rhythm or pattern almost magical. Let us see some examples. Sasasihi sasusuhu saso yeya yaya yayah lalau leelam lalo lolah shashisha shishushihi shashan. Here we see that every quarter of the verse, that is, each pada, is made up of only one phonetic sound. Na no na nunno nunno no nana 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 nanu nunno nunno nanunne no nane na nunna nunnanut. Here, one phonetic sound, that is na, makes up the entire verse. Chara chanchushchirare chi chanchachi rarucha ruchaha chachara ruchirascharu charai rachara chanchuraha. Here, the verse is made up of two phonetic sounds, that is ch and ra. Some verses are palindromes, that is, they sound the same when read forwards or backwards. For example, Vetra shakakuje shaile leshai je kukashatrave Vetra shakakuje shaile leshai je kukashatrave Yatakim vidisho jetun tunjesho divikintaya Yatakim vidisho jetun tunjesho divikintaya. Sometimes words, phrases or lines repeat themselves in the verse but have different meanings every time. This is known as the Yamaka Alankar. Some examples are Vane vane vanasadam margam margam upeyusham Banair banaihi samasaktam Shanke shankena shamyati. Another interesting verse goes Vikashamiyur jagati shamargana Vikashamiyur jagati shamarganaha Vikashamiyur jagati shamargana Vikashamiyur jagati shamarganaha. Some verses have very symmetric arrangements and need to be understood through graphic representations. For example, Na suroyam nava nago dharas samstho na rakshasaha Na sukhoyam nava bhogo dharanistho hi rajasaha. This verse is an example of Gomutrika Bandha, wherein you will observe a zigzag pattern in the verse. An example of Sarvato Bhadra goes like this. Deva kanini kavade vahika swa swakahiva kakare bhabhare kaka niswabhavya vyabhasvani. Kiratarjuniyam stands on the cusp of two traditions. One that was of simplicity of language and the other that was depicting scholarly eminence. In fact, this composition takes inspiration from poets like Kalidas when it comes to beauty and simplicity of language, and simultaneously becomes an inspiration for later poets like Magh and Sri Harsh, whose aim, it seems, was to canvas their brilliance through constant use of rhetoric and figurative language. These later poets wanted to surpass Bharavi in this sense, which they did, but at the cost of being incomprehensible to the larger audience. Apart from these entertaining verses that can be compared to contemporary word puzzles, there are verses wherein one verse, if interpreted in different ways, can mean differently. Following is an example of such a verse. Jagati sharane yukto harikantah sudhasitah danavarshi kritashamso nagaraja iva babhau. In above verse, Arjun can be compared to qualities of either Himalaya or Airavat the elephant or Sheshanag when interpreted in three different ways. It is to be understood that in the process of creating all kinds of special effects as seen above, the rules of grammar, quality of meaning, and historical or cultural references are not compromised even one bit. This is the sheer brilliance of the poet as well as of Sanskrit language that allows the poet to experiment with it at length. We bow down to such accomplished poet and admire him. The words of Ganga Devi fit well, who says, Vimarda vyakta saurabhya bharati bharavehe kavehe dhatte bakula maleva vidadheetanam chamatkriyam. The compositions of poet Bharavi gives pleasure to the learned, just like the fragrance of garland of bakul flowers. The more you grind the flowers in your hands, the more fragrance it produces. Just like that, the more the learned audience ponders on Bharavi's composition, the more magical their experience becomes. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, make sure to subscribe for more such videos.